All right. The first ever Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl podcast question mark. Talk show, figuring out what's going on, early meta discussion. This game is brand new, and I'm joined by my good friend Subtle, but he will introduce himself in a second. Let me give you a little background on me. My name is JD. I am a former Melee player, commentator, and podcaster. I've been playing since technically I'm a doc kid. I'm a wave one, day one doc kid. Came out when I was 6. The game of Melee came out when I was 6, but been playing for 7 or 8 years now. Traveled all over and trying to bring some of that competitive talent, I guess, to the Nickelodeon cast. And I'm joined here, as I said, with Subtle. How you doing?
I'm good, man. Yeah, I'm subtle. For those who don't know me, I've played Melee also. Pretty much same thing. Doc Kid started in 2014. Played some other Smash games and stuff along the way, but have pretty much always kind of focused on Melee as both a player, commentator, and even TOing and stuff as well. And yeah, just really enjoying the game so far, and I'm excited to see where it's headed.
Sick. Yeah, me too. And we got in touch. I think I tweeted something about just being excited about what's going on, and you reached out via DMs, and we've been buds, of course, through the Melee scene. And
Yeah.
I was super amped to sit down with you and kind of hear all of your thoughts because I think there are a lot of different opinions, generally good opinions out there. I think there is a lot of hype for the game, and there's so much space in between that, right? And so we've sent each other some sick topics. I'm looking at your questions. I think they're fantastic. My dog's barking in the background, and I'm in a super scuffed space. So we're doing this for the fun of it. If you want pro
Yeah.
analysis, go to Hungry Box, I guess. But I think I'd said a little bit about what I'm liking, but the first topic is how we feel about the game mechanics and some changes we'd like to see, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I like the game. It's obviously a platform fighter and stuff and shares a lot of similarities to Smash, but there's also like a lot of really noticeable differences. I think like the way that, blocking or guarding works is pretty unique. And like how you kind of play around it, how you play out of your block. Also just like recoveries and defense and um kind of like the way that combos work. There's like a lot in the engine um that the kind of RPS mechanic of heavies interacting both in the air and on the ground is really interesting, even though that's something that I feel like hasn't come into play as often in like high level matches. When it's happened, it feels like more of an accident than something that's intended. But I think that there's a lot there to explore with like hard reads, right? Where you have like a simple example is, players coming down with like a strong down air when they're above their opponent. The typical thing is for someone to go up there and try and meet them with a strong up air, and that wins the interaction, right? The up air beats the down air. So then if you have someone that's coming down, instead of doing the down air, the strong down, they come down with a strong mid, that beats the up air, and then you have people trying to meet them with the strong down air to counter that. So it's like a whole sort of like read situation, but I feel like that hasn't been something that's like been explored, even though I think that that's something that down the road might happen. But there's like a lot of those like really niche mechanics that they kind of like put in there that you wouldn't expect, and I'm excited to see where the meta goes as far as like developing around those game specific mechanics rather than traditional platform fighter or fighting game strategies that you usually see.
Yeah, it's one of the first times in a platform fighter, or specifically, I guess, the Smash games, where you have a true rock, paper, scissors mechanic. I guess you have the grab, shield, attack, which is technically a RPS, but then, you have rolls involved, and there's no rolling in this game, or spot dodges. And so I think it's an interesting situation where they do scale back some of the mechanics. And then they do two things. One, they kind of buffed the speed. It's a fast game, and so I think the simplicity through that speed is what makes it so instantly fun, I think, for a lot of melee players at least, coming in and they're just like, oh my god, I could wave dash as fast as I can't wave dash as fast. Like, oh my god, I'm gonna have to grind wave dashing again. And two, I think the simplicity leads to, like you said, like the reads coming into this game will be another viable kind of strategy where maybe you pick a heavy character or a character with some sort of, as the meta develops, we don't know this yet, but there might be some sort of early kill setup at a low percent where, it literally is a 50-50. And once those 50-50s are discovered, either off of tech rolls or, DIs off grab or whatever we discover, I think because the game is pretty simple, and my main point is I think it's going to lead into a metagame of like pocket characters and counter picks. I think that's going to be a direction that this game can really find itself heading in. But of course, it's only week one. In terms of changes, which is the second part of your question, or at least the topic, they already are implementing changes, which is freaking phenomenal. You know what I'm referring to, right? With that kind of week one patch that they put out.
Yeah, it was more like a bug fix, but like it fixed a lot of stuff that was like very strong for characters, obviously like the Sandy Infinite, and like getting locked out of being able to tech and stuff like that. Mikey's like stall Infinite and some other stuff, which is really good. I'm glad like that kind of fix came out. I mean, less than a week after the game was released. So it like that's a really good sign moving forward. At the same time, like I think we're kind of praising some of the other aspects, right? Like I really like that the true RPS mechanic, but right now it's hard to understand exactly like what's player driven and what's game driven, right? Where it's hard to figure out if it's not coming into play as often because the players aren't used to that interaction, or if because other options are superior, meaning that like I'd love to see strong down airs and stuff come into play a little bit more in like off stage play, but characters generally at the top tier have such strong light down airs, right? There's so many characters in the cast that can just down air off the side of the stage or do a lot of like light up air strings that heavy attacks don't get used as often, so there's less opportunity for those to come into play. And I don't know if that just changes as people get used to the game, or if that's something where they need to scale back some of the light, aerial options, so that way the heavy options become more appealing, and then those play into the meta a little bit more. It's kind of hard to know right now since we're so early in the game, but I'd love to see that come into play more, and I don't know if that's something where the devs need to intervene to make that happen, or if that just kind of happens organically.
Yeah, I think there might be a physics change that might come into play here, where DI might be able to be buffed on down airs or neutral airs too. I don't know if you saw any of the tournaments from this past weekend, but Michelangelo is starting to rise up faster than his Infinite through the tier list. And just through a grab, double neutral grab, like it's almost it's literally the Sandy jab, but with a few more inputs. And I think that a physics change or a DI change where, that might exist as much as, let's say, Fox up tilting a Sheik 30 times would exist on paper with no DI against a bad player. But I think defensive counterplay is a little bit lacking so far. And I think DI is one of the first places that I would suggest they look. Because otherwise, you don't want to nerf some of the cooler aspects of this game. I do think those early, like literally, I think day one, or maybe it was like day zero when the influencers got their hands on the game, where Armada released a 10-minute combo video of him just quadruple daring with Oblina and stuff.
Oblina. Yep.
And I was like, that's so cool. Like I'm happy that exists. But maybe, we should be able to not die at 20. Perhaps we could DI into the stage, or there's something a little more graceful than kind of the nerf hammer. But it's tough. I'm not gonna pretend to say the solution's too simple.
Yeah, I think it's like some of the things that like I've kind of thought about, right, with like the light down airs, right? I think the main issue is that, or the thing that's bothering people in particular about it, is how quickly that you can get the kill. Like you said, like you do it at super low percent and it's still insanely strong and combos into itself. So you have people who are, taking stocks at under 50% by just doing multiple light down airs in a row off stage, because it comes out so fast. And I think even rather than like nerfing a character that has it, like I'm wondering if, everything kind of, all the aerials auto cancel in this game, like that's what big reason why it's so fast, and I like that. But I wonder if taking away how quickly you can throw out, the air, if you're still in the air, like I wonder if you extend the end lag so that way you can't string them together as easily in the air, so that way you can't do that as easily off stage. But that way it's not affected when you're using it to combo on stage, since it's still auto canceling. That might be a way to balance it, so that way it isn't as like over centralizing off stage at like early percents, but you still keep it as a strong option for like your combo game on stage, which is probably where you want to see a lot of the combos anyway.
Yeah, or possibly they make it so, you know how dash attacks can cancel into an attack. Maybe light airs can only cancel into a strong air, and then you have maybe a mid percent where you'll light into strong, and you have to space it correctly, or you have to fast fall it, or there's something. Fast falling is not a thing, but whatever.
Well, kind of. I mean, kind of with
air
the
dash.
air dash. Yeah,
Right.
Pseudo fast fall.
So maybe there is a solution there too. I do think that, and this goes into our faith in the developers. I do think that I'm more excited to have these conversations than any other game I've played, because it was weeks before the game came out where the devs were being completely upfront. We knew they were Slap City folk. We knew that they had a background in Smash and PM, and they really enjoyed what the competitive scenes did. And we knew that they kind of had our back in a sense. And so these conversations about like, oh, what can we fix, or what's broken, or blah, 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 feel so much more fruitful than the days of like Dota, where you have to scream the loudest for like as long as you can for developers to catch wind of what you're doing. This feels a lot more catered to the competitive experience.
Yeah, I mean they've been really upfront from the beginning, like you said, just communicating general things about the game and what their intentions are for the scene that develops around it, right? They've talked about, Nickelodeon's going to have the scenes back as far as trying to encourage pop bonuses and large tournaments, and I think the rollout has been fantastic. I think the gameplay itself aside, I think just in the way that the game has been promoted, the excitement around it is, they've done a phenomenal job with that. All of the invitationals, Hungrybox running like several large tournaments and getting Thaddeus Cruz and stuff to hop on commentary. I think for the first one was really cool. I think they're genuinely passionate about the game, and the quick balance patch to fix some pretty like game breaking bugs in a lot of way, doing that 4 or 5 days after the game came out, like, is a really good sign moving forward. They've talked about having DLC characters pretty soon after the launch, so probably in the first probably within a month of after the game's release, so in the next couple weeks we'll get something. They've talked about wanting to do consistent balance patches, so I think that we're going to get something pretty soon as well, beyond like the bug fix and stuff that they've already sent, maybe something more significant. The fact that they've talked a lot about it is a good sign. So now it's just kind of a wait and see on just how meaningful and how consistent they are with rolling stuff out. But I don't have a reason to doubt them so far.
Yeah, and just my last thoughts on the dev team is, the people have been talking about the game feeling a little unpolished, and I think the story is well known about, like, it wasn't the biggest budget in the world. The Nickelodeon didn't want to take a huge swing. And, they're a company too. And it all is it makes a lot of sense why the game feels like it does, where it's like, okay, it's like an RPG. I heard someone say it's like an RPG where they put all of their points into gameplay.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I think, that's not entirely true. I think the cast is a good size and the stages feel at least, fun in some capacity. But regardless, and this is what I've heard, is that they had a strict release date that they had to stick to no matter what. And so, yes, they're going to continue working on the game for a long time. That early DLC, that's actually breaking news to me. I didn't know the month or so was the timeline there. That's exciting.
I think they said, pretty shortly after the release. So I don't know exactly what that means, but I would assume within a few weeks, maybe a month or two at the most. But
yeah, and then the only thing we have to look out for is the early balance patches, which I would like to think are going to focus more on making Korra not a sack of garbage, and maybe just buffing the bad characters rather than nerfing the good ones. But that's all to be seen. I think I want to move on to the online play, which is again maybe one of the best. Well, I hate to say best, but best signs of a competitive game is when it has rollback netcode. So it's one of the best features of the game, but it's not the best netcode we've seen in a fighting game. I know Strive, I haven't played it personally, but I've heard many stories about how Strive was just an absolute knockout in that capacity. And I do think Melee has it beat in the current state of affairs as well. But I'd love to hear your thoughts there.
Yeah, like it's a very like polarizing experience online where the good connections are really, really good. But it doesn't seem like the ping is the large issue, right? Like I've had connections of 100+ ping that have been really good, but then I have they have the like green bars and stuff, which I assume is just like the stability of the connection. They're not really 100% clear. I don't really know exactly like how to read that. But like some of the connections I'll get 40, 50, 60 ping, and people are rollback. I mean, legitimately like teleporting around the screen, which is unfortunate. And I've heard that people who are more in the know about this kind of stuff than me, talking about like the like delay, like the frame or input delay and stuff isn't necessarily there or isn't enough. And I've heard people speculate that because the game is a little bit more graphics intensive, that people with worse, particularly on PC, people with worse graphics cards or processing power, the game struggles to keep up on that end, and that's why you get the one-sided rollback. So, and I know that I'm not the only one who's experienced that. I've seen a lot of people on Twitter just kind of talking about like the rollback. They hyped up having rollback in the game, but it's not nearly as good as it could be. And I think you and I are a little bit more spoiled having played on Slippy and stuff with Melee, where it's pretty consistent. High ping can be a little bit bad, but there's almost no rollbacks, like very, very little. And there's some matches where I get on and it's just really, really bad and stuff for this game. I don't know how much they can do on their end. I'm hoping that there's more, because I think the best way for this game to succeed would be to have really outstanding online play. So I'd love to see them address that sooner rather than later. The other issue that I've had is, I don't know if you've experienced this also, where sometimes I'll queue up for the competitive play, find somebody, but they're AFK. They just like went AFK queuing. And so I leave because they won't start up the match, and then I queue again and I find the same player again, and that's the only person I can match with. And so I get basically in this like stalemate of like, I can't find a match because it just keeps putting me in a lobby with someone who's not like at their computer, and then I'm just kind of like locked out of competitive play essentially. So I have to go try to find like a custom lobby or something like that to play with, which is a little bit annoying. So I don't know, adding some way to time them out and stuff if they're not doing something in the queue might be good to address that. But yeah, there's a few stuff that I would love to see changed.
Yeah, and I think they're fully aware of those issues. I do think that they were pushing rollback, and this might be a bit of a disappointment for how it was exactly rolled out. I do think that the private lobbies I've had, at least first off, I've only had it on Switch. I haven't had my PC set up. I will be getting it on Steam. Don't worry, I'm not a Switch gamer now. It was out of necessity, but I was hardwired and playing. Even with the Wi-Fi kids out there, every once in a while I just get a great game. But it was definitely the rarity. But the lobbies have been fine, so that's good. Is that if I know that I'm with someone and it's that direct connection, I could get some competitive games. That being said, I totally agree. I think that a matchmaking system that also the rating system feels weird, and I don't know. I went from like completely destroying people and then 3 games later just getting bodied, and then it's like maybe it's just because it's early. I don't know. That doesn't really matter. As long as as long as I could get competitive matches when I want to, and they're solo, the training mode, which I haven't deep dived into yet, but the frame by frame and the options there, I do think that is enough for a competitive scene to thrive. Maybe not to grow at the fastest pace, because you do want people getting a taste of competitive matches with 0 barrier to entry. You want someone to just come in and get hooked on matchmaking and be like, oh, this guy's 1100 rating, and then they discover tournaments just randomly. You do want that at some point, but hell, Ultimate had that, so I'm confident that if a game with the worst netcode to ever exist can have Wi-Fi warriors emerge into the competitive scene, then I think Nick's in a good place to do so as well.
Yeah, I don't think they're that far away. I think there's a lot of it's not even just about the online play. I think about the game in general, but the framework is there. There's a couple of things that they could adjust so that way the execution is a little bit better and more consistent. But I really don't think that they're far away. And just to touch on something you mentioned earlier, it's funny thinking about how, they were on a strict deadline. They had to, meet this release date, and it was kind of rushed. And it's at least for us, looking back, Melee basically had the exact same thing, right? Where they put Melee together in less than a year because they needed to get it ready for the GameCube's release. And that turned out pretty well overall. So it's funny how that parallel kind of exists. And hey, maybe that's the key to fun platform fighters, is just put a little bit of a stress on them and have to meet a tight deadline. I don't know.
Yeah, and then Nickelodeon All-Star Melee comes out in 5 years and is a complete show. It's super slow, but a great adventure mode. If we're following the same trend, then they're going to get super polished on the next one. Yeah. So speaking of framework, let's talk about the top tiers here. I think that there are definitely some front runners. I have been watching about 30 seconds of every tier list video I could find just to see their finished tier list, and just to clock data points, because I'm not super interested in changing my main or really getting too involved in the early metas. I do know that it's one of the easiest ways for influencers and top players to get clicks is to release their tier lists, and we decided off mic we are absolutely not doing a tier list right now.
I mean, I've seen some. I think Armada even said he's just I'm making another tier list because it's good for clicks. I mean, they're upfront about it. They understand.
Yeah, I think when I was 13 years old, I was and younger, I was like, oh, this is the best character, and oh no, he said that. And it's definitely it's playground fodder for sure. But in terms of the competitive scene and this weekend, which we'll talk about in a little bit, this upcoming weekend, there are definitely some front runners right now, and it is so volatile that we might embarrass ourselves by saying something today, and by Thursday, just completely have no idea what we're talking about. So I'll ask you, top of your head, who are the let's say top 3, and if you really need to go to top 5 characters that are likely to win at SmashCon.
Yeah, I think for me, I think I have a top 4 to split it down the middle. But basically, the Michelangelo and Leonardo off the top of my head, and then Aang and Lucy seem to have those 4 characters. I think are a step above the rest. It's weird because there's kind of that next tier of characters right below that feel like they're clear. They're also standing above the rest of the cast, but that's Cat Dog, SpongeBob, Ablina, those characters feel like that next tier after in some order, but they feel like they're just not quite up to the other characters that just seem to be I think those other the top 4 just have such really linear neutral games and punish games that it's just it's really hard to not be consistent with them. Where Aang's just hitting Nair 50 times off stage, and same with like Michelangelo now, which is, like you said, we might embarrass ourselves in a few days because at the day one Michelangelo, feel like I saw most people like, oh, he's like bottom, maybe like mid tier, and now people are like, is he the best in the game? I don't know. So like it's crazy how stuff is developing. But we'll kind of see. Leonardo, I think, and Lucy seem to have like a bunch of players all doing like very well. So those four at least seem to stick out the most. I don't know if you agree or have some other picks.
No, I think you nailed it. And rather than reiterate kind of what you said, the quick thing about Michelangelo, he had again, I said it before, but just one tournament. It was like over the course of 2 or 3 days where people discovered how good his neutral air grab strings were, his light neutral into grab, and just, exactly, linear, consistent combo game. I mean, there's a reason why early melee meta was Sheik as the best. It's the same deal. And just to follow that train of thought, again, rather than, I think I agree completely about what you're saying. Thinking back to Melee, and I was 6 years old when the game came out, so I wasn't really following until maybe 2007. I caught a little bit of MLG, but we all know the history. The way the metagame developed was contingent on how much people were able to watch the other top players. And it was a huge barrier to entry, and it was very difficult to watch the videos, and 8 times more difficult to record and share videos. And so you combine 5 different platform fighting scenes, you put all the pros together, you have them all stream this game for days on end and see every tournament that happens and see every lick of gameplay that's relevant. That's why this game is so supercharged. It's nothing too special about the game itself. It's the era we're in, where people will pick it apart and find out the good stuff very, very, very quickly.
Yeah, and you touched on it earlier, right? Like, I think another part of it, in addition, right, we have all of the footage readily accessible so people can watch back tournament matches, see how top players learn from each other really quickly. Even top players able to pull stuff from one another really quickly. And then you have, like you mentioned earlier, the frame by frame with the hitbox, like kind of, if you want to call it like a debug mode in the practice mode and stuff, where you can really break down how moves work. It's something that we didn't, you don't have to have someone like Mewtwo King testing on 2 controllers by himself to figure out all the frame data in the game. Like, right. It's right there in front of us. People can do that on their own really easily. And then on top of that, you have a bunch of platform fighting and fighting game scenes who, a lot of experienced players, it sounds crazy, but like they just know how to learn better than they did maybe 10 or 15 years ago, 20 years ago. So they know how to, they know what to look out for. They know like what makes a good move, what makes a good character. They can kind of eyeball test where they're just like, this looks like it should link together, and then trying to figure stuff out a little bit faster than we used to. So I think like the players have gotten better at figuring out how to break down a game, and then the technology, like you said, is there, and to kind of watch one another. And then as well, like we touched on earlier, the devs having a really strong rollout with a bunch of events and stuff. There's been plenty of events for people to enter and watch and consume. So it's like all those factors combined have this. The meta has just like rapidly kind of shifted over, just like basically like a week here.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you're talking about, and that ties into our next topic a bit when we're talking about all these different scenes, right, and how they're embracing All-Star Brawl in kind of different ways. But there definitely seems to be a, I don't think any scene, I think maybe obviously Slap City is probably the biggest claim to like, for this to be a true successor. I mean, straight up, for the people who've played it a lot, I've touched it. I haven't really dived into it, but I've heard that it's like, yeah, this is the same game. Like people are just saying this is so many similarities.
Yeah, I haven't played. I've watched, but there's definitely a lot of similarities, I think.
Right. And so obviously that scene transitioned, but I do think that, not every Ultimate player is coming over. Not every Melee player is coming over. And it's funny to see the divide, and it's not a big deal. Like it's cool that it is. Like, I don't think anyone is saying I'm quitting my game for this. Like, I'm thinking of this as a game that I could probably, like, I'll never quit Melee. I don't think there's a single game that'll do that, just because it's Melee. I mean, come on. But I think there are a lot of players being like, yeah, I could play this in Ultimate. Like, I could play this in Melee and take them both seriously and enter both and enjoy both in full. I would love to hear your thoughts, like all the different platform fighting gaming communities coming together. Like, what are you noticing about that, and what are you looking out for?
Yeah, it's like you said. I think Slap City players seem to be picking up on it pretty quickly. It's so hard to compare players from non-Smash games, I think, to like Smash games, because like, Rivals is another platform fighter that seems to have a lot of crossover as well to like great success. I think was it Full Stream? I think won one of the invitationals, and I think he's a top Rivals player. Maybe I'm mixing him up with another game scene, but I think that's correct. Fumblin is like a top like Slap City player. She plays Lucy and has had like a lot of success. And it's interesting because like I feel like obviously Slap City I know is like very similar overall, but like Rivals and like the guard mechanic I think is a lot closer to the shielding in this game compared to like Smash. And seeing, right, I think like I've watched a lot of Melee players just because I stay up, I follow them anyway, stream the game, and it's interesting watching them kind of struggle to figure out just how to use the guard mechanic properly. Where like when I watch Melee players play a lot, they're just swinging over and over again, like they're just putting out a lot of moves and trying to play the game that way. Whereas like other scenes seem to be approaching it a little bit differently and having a more balanced approach between defense and offense. And so it's interesting. Void obviously has really like dominated early, although he's kind of dominated pretty much any game he's picked up. I think Hugs was like noting that they were talking about it on Twitter or something about how like he's like top ranked in like a bunch of different games and stuff online. So that might be just a Void thing. But yeah, it's interesting to see a lot of representation from a bunch of different scenes. I think like the first HBox Invitational had like 5 or 6 different like platform fighter representation like in the top 8 alone. So yeah, it'll be I think that pretty much anyone from any of the platform fighters can pick up on the game, and it'll be good to see like I said, I think players from different games will have a different approach on how they try to play the game, and that will help see like what type of play styles succeed, what doesn't succeed, and people can kind of blend it into what you need to do in this game, which is its own thing.
Yeah, I think another glaring that's a good point about Void, by the way, because I was racking my brain like who are the other top performers in the Ultimate scene, and DeBuzz comes to mind as like one of the steady top 5, top 4 players in Ultimate, and he's struggling at least to match that exact performance. Maybe it's a Zim thing, but speaking of DeBuzz, his playstyle is so singular, where I don't know if you're ever able to catch some of his Zim gameplay. It is classic DeBuzz. It is so funny how he's like, oh, this is kind of like Rosalina and Olimar. I'm going to be the worst. And just like jump around the stage and set his traps and discover the game that way. And I think a huge props to the devs for providing a really interesting range of characters and playstyles that, obviously the Patrick mains aren't getting love right now, but there was a huge effort, I think, by the devs to at least give the sandbox of like, all right, here's all the different things we're going for, and like maybe there's a couple very small Patrick buffs that he comes in a meta, or maybe he's a counter pick against a shield heavy meta. Like they really like cast a big net of all the different fighting, or at least platform fighting game styles. We are back. Apologies for that. But let's just go right into our next topic. We are going to talk a bit about the top players and how they're going to define the meta. We talked about Void. Void's definitely on top of everyone's mind. He just looks absolutely insane with that Aang. But I think that there's something to be said about, how Leffen's going to get involved, if he's going to continue to be a voice. Mango's been playing a lot. Top players are one thing, and the top performers, the first LAN tournament, we'll talk about that again in a second. But I think that how, the Hungry Boxes, the even players like Coney that are getting a lot of time on the big screen, and these influencers that are really pushing this game, Armada, of course. I think how they decide to talk about the characters and talk about changes they want to see are in a unique position to influence a lot going forward, at least in these first maybe 6 months or so. But I'd love to hear your thoughts there.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like top players, like you said, I think Void is gonna try and run with this as long as he can stay, at the top of the meta or near the top of the meta. And I think, even, contrast that with some other platform fighters and stuff. You might see a lot of people shift, a lot of top players from other communities shift toward making this their main game. I'm not sure that Melee or Ultimate players will necessarily do that, but it depends. You have a lot of these, they've already announced a lot of prize spots, pop bonuses and stuff that are pretty significant from Nickelodeon. If that continues, this is going to be like a first opportunity for like Slap City players to have like a real like platform for their own gameplay and stuff where they could make a living, I think, potentially in esports and stuff off the game. You kind of talked about, DeBuzz having like his own unique play style with the game with Zim. It remains to be seen. I think like I said, I think for Melee and Ultimate players, it's going to depend a lot on their performances and whether they're pushed toward continuing to pursue being a top player in this game or not. I think the early results are going to kind of define that pretty quickly. But for a lot of those other scenes, I think you'll kind of see some of the names I mentioned earlier, like Full Stream and Fumbling and stuff. I think Pika the Pikachu was like the SpongeBob player who was like a top Slap City player as well. I think they're gonna give this an extended shot here because they haven't really had this like really good opportunity, I think, to make something in esports and stuff for them. So this is a great opportunity for a lot of those players, and I think Hungry Box has already had a really positive impact on the community and its quick growth early here. I don't know necessarily that he seems all that interested in being a top level competitor in the game. I think he'll still play it, but I think hosting his weekly online events and putting out a lot of content and working with the devs is all really positive for the scene's growth. So I think you'll see a lot of those names kind of continue.
Yeah, honestly, I haven't seen anything that's made me second guess any content creator. Huge shout outs to Hungry Box, because those streams, that one stream in particular, when the devs came on and talked, I was zoned in because I was following the hype and I was really getting excited about getting into this game on day one, and giving the devs that platform into the commentary and then hosting the tournament, all that. I mean, huge shout outs to Hungry Box. But overall, yeah, I do think that the volatility of any game in the early meta, let alone something that's going toe to toe with the almighty Smash Bros. And seemingly starting off on the right foot. There's I think there's a lot of opportunity for new people who I consider myself in the newer end of, or at least the lesser known end of content creators and people interested in making stuff. And it's really cool to see how much room there is for anything from, the donkey style videos of just like, silliness and goofing around with friends, and the party game style, and, just looking at Mr. Toastman and saying this is absurd, to the competitive side of, literally going into frame data that, I'm sure Mewtwo King will do another round of move set analysis and all that. It's like, it's truly a sandbox in the content sphere as well, which made me excited to sit down with you and just talk thoughts. I think that in terms of the top players and the top content creators, they're going to continue to reap the rewards of notoriety and YouTube algorithms and blah blah blah. Hopefully the devs are going to take a more democratic approach to implementing changes. I do think that we need to give Leffen the same sized megaphone as any other player, because he's been known to be in the Melee scene as quite outspoken, to put it one way. I'm a big proponent of the things Leffen says on technical things, but going forward, I think it's important for people to realize that like their opinions matter just as much as anyone else. And the devs, and I don't mean to put this in this tone, but let's really be listening to everyone out there and to make the correct changes rather than the changes that the loudest or the most popular players might want. That being said, don't buff Nigel just because HBox wants you to buff Nigel. All right, let's wait to see what that character looks like.
Yeah, and I think one of the concerns is you have this top tier, and I think that I think there is room obviously to scale back some of the characters, but I'd rather see them scale back general mechanics, like I was talking about earlier, right? About like light down airs being kind of over centralizing in the meta for a lot of characters as far as their combo game, their offstage game, stuff like that. And I think that by scaling that back across the board, that could help level the playing field for a lot of the cast without targeting a character or two that you say, we just need to nerf them. We just need to they're too strong. We just need to nerf specifically that character and not other characters. There's such a limited roster right now, which I think is a good thing, but you don't want to push away a portion of your player base by really quickly just kind of nerfing a character into the ground to where they go from one of the best characters in the game to a mid or even a bottom tier overnight, only a couple weeks in. I think that's going to alienate the players who play those characters, especially if you do it. If you nerf, like we were talking about earlier, I think there's probably 4, maybe 5 characters that are kind of dominating right now. But if you say we're going to nerf all 4 of those characters simultaneously and scale them back pretty significantly, you're talking about 20% of your roster that is going to see like widespread change, and that's a good amount of your player base and stuff as well. So they definitely have to be careful with that. I think it's going to be hard for them to not nerf those characters at least slightly, but I don't want to see them go overboard, especially early when a lot of people, like including ourselves, I think would admit we don't really know what we're talking about yet. We're like a week into the game, and I think we see trends and we see kind of like points for certain characters where it's like these seem like really strong things and that's how it's playing out early, but we've already seen rapid changes in opinion over a short period of time. So I'd at least like to see them hold out here for a few more weeks, and as we were talking about getting into here soon, with like LAN tournaments and stuff over the next couple months starting this weekend, seeing how that stuff plays out as well.
Yeah, so far, early bug changes. A Sandy Infinite getting taken out of the game is not a nerf. It's literally a bug fix. And so, very happy about early fixes like that. We'll see how it goes with the balance patches, but I agree. I think they need to wait a bit, see how the first LAN tournament goes. We remember early Smash 4, the hoo-ha fiasco. And you know what? That might have been over centralizing for a bit, but I'm glad it happened. There's something just very refreshing about a game not being solved, but also kind of being solved. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I expect a lot of silliness, and let's just not get too complainy. I think to reiterate on how the top players and influencers are, influencing these potential nerfs, I think they're all doing a pretty good job. I don't hear too much shouting about nerfs. I don't hear too much complaining about. I did see DeBuzz say buff Zim, and I'm like, dude, really? You're gonna you're 5 days in and you're stuck on a main? Like, are you play all the characters before you're whatever? That bugged me a little bit, but
and
maybe,
just as
whatever.
a last, I was just gonna make a last point kind of on that. Armada had a really good point. I saw him talking about, right, where he had all those combos and stuff, and the compilations and stuff, and Twitch clips of him doing like really, really nasty Oblina combos that were, with the quadruple down airs and stuff off stage, and people were like, Oblina's best in the game or top two, and like if you look at a lot of the tournaments, it's not playing out that way results wise. Like there really is very little Oblina representation at a lot of the tournaments, particularly in the top 8, top 16, top 32. Like it isn't matching what a lot of the other characters have so far. And he brought up how, especially early in Ultimate when he was playing Inkling, right, where people seemed when Ultimate came out, Inkling was considered like a top 3, top 5 character. People were like, this character might be the best in the game. And he brought up the point that like compared to what were other top tiers that were considered at the time, Inkling has received almost no nerfs in all of the balance patches of Ultimate, yet has just steadily trended downward as people have figured out ways of getting out of certain combos, realizing that there's certain tools have a lot of counterplay to them. And so we're making all these conclusions really early, but there's a lot that can change just by the player base better understanding the character, the game, the engine, all that stuff. So I think we just need to let things play out for now, even if things seem broken. Bug fixes obviously I think are an exception to that. With stalling, you talked about the infinite combo. We talked about earlier with Mikey getting his jump back on like his shell stall. I think I've seen that like Toph can do like an infinite platform with her like down B off the top of the screen, so she can literally just like hide forever and stuff and like time people out where you can't like touch her. Stuff like that I think is going to be obviously taken out of the game, even if Toph's not a strong character right now. But as far as like really significant balance patches, I'd like to see people just slow down a little bit and let the meta develop, let people discover some things.
Absolutely. And talking a bit about plans going forward and stuff like that, I had a better transition. We did not talk about plans going forward, but that is what we're going to be talking about, because I'm really curious about what kind of led you to what led us, I should say, to connect and start doing whatever the hell this was, start talking about the game and producing content about the game. What are your, I guess, temporary or initial plans, I should say, for getting involved with Nick All-Stars, and who are you maining also? I'm curious about.
Oh yeah, I haven't even talked. I've been maining Helga right now.
No, really?
Yeah, I've been
Nice.
maining Helga. I really like the character, and I think she's probably underrated. There's like a couple of issues, like bugs with the character, where her counter isn't working properly. I don't know if you're aware of where like she's eating all of the percent from the moves on her counter, and the percent that it's doing back is always 5%.
Oh, jeez.
So like if you try to do like a rinse and repeat thing with her counter, she just has to like versus like Reptar, where you'll try to like counter under his up B and hit him off. You just eat like the 20% every single time, and it's like by the time you get the kill with the counter, you ate like 100+%.
That's so funny.
I can't imagine how that's intended, but I think she'll end up being buffed. I don't think she's like top tier or anything, but she's, I think, a little bit underexplored. I'd like to, segueing off that, I'd love to see not just myself but other people just putting out more content for like a lot of these like less explored characters. Like I've seen almost none of Lincoln as a character. Like I know pretty like of all of the cast, I know basically nothing about Lincoln whatsoever. I've seen like almost zero gameplay. I can't even name a top player that plays the character or even like secondaries it. I haven't really seen like people play Helga. I think you were talking about earlier, right? Like Cora is pretty weak. Patrick, it's funny that Patrick being known as like a really weak character in particular has actually caused other top players to gravitate toward him, like MKLeo, and I think like Plup was playing Patrick at a point just to be like, let's see what he can actually do. People are saying he's bad, but I'll see what we can do with the character. I'd love to see more content with other characters and stuff that are being underrepresented right now, and as people kind of like flock toward the higher tiers. I'd love to, I've streamed a little bit of Helga and stuff, and tried to get some clips and stuff here and there. But yeah, I'd love to, have commentary opportunities. I know that there's some tri-state stuff supposedly in the works that I'm trying to find out a little bit more about and see what I can make happen with my work schedule and stuff. I'd like to compete where possible. Online, I'm not like super keen on, but I'm already registered for Genesis and stuff, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I'm just enjoying the game, and I just really like learning a new game in particular and finding out about it, especially in the early stages. I was the same way with Smash 4 when it came out, and Ultimate Rivals when it came out. Like, I just love seeing a game that's like fresh and kind of unexplored, and just like jumping in like the sandbox and figuring out what's going on kind of with all the characters and the engine and how it all interacts, and kind of just on that journey of how it all unfolds in the end. So I don't know how your game plan is kind of looking.
Very similar. I have chosen my main as Sandy, and I was very disappointed when I realized that she was on Leffen's like SS tier #1 with a bullet. And then relieved when it was a Jab Infinite that was most likely going to get patched out, and then it was, and I'm like, oh, thank God, I'm not going to be looked at as some sort of dirty wobbler or whatever. But I think Sandy's really cool. Her neutral air is incredibly centralizing, so I hope that they don't touch that too much, because I do think it has a lot of counterplay, and it just kind of bodies like bad players. So that's the only complaint I've heard. It's just like, that's the whole thing. I do think her down B is really interesting, the boots, because you could cancel it, and then double jump and then air dodge. What's it called? Air dash.
Air dash. Yeah.
God, I gotta get these words right if I'm gonna have a podcast. So you could do down B, cancel, double jump, air dash, and get really high really fast. Which feels pretty unique, because then you have a lot of options to damage, and it's very technical too, which is exciting as a Fox main, to have all these very fast button inputs that feels very grindy, and like, okay, let's figure this out and let's get the frames right, and then see if I can maybe be early enough in a mid-tier character to have the room to actually discover stuff on my own. Not that I'm, one of the brightest minds to touch the game, but it's always a race to figure out the big thing of each character. And if I was picking Leonardo, I have no shot against these real top tier, 8 hours a day streamers. Cat Dog has already been figured out, it seems like, even though I didn't know until today that you could press down B and switch to Cat.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, Sandy seems really good in terms of going forward with commentary, content, non-gameplay related stuff. I'm excited to give it the same kind of entry I did with Melee, but now I have a lot of background experience for it. Like, I don't need to fiddle around for 3 hours to figure out how to do what we're doing right now. It took me about 5 minutes because I have experience. And taking the experience, I know you play a lot of Dead by Daylight, and you have, I guess we both have like things that we learned from other games and like streaming content, etc. And like, okay, we made that mistake 2 years ago, and now we encountered it again, and we don't have to like really feel that pain as much in a lot of areas. So it's cool to be almost given like, all right, here's another starting line. You're with everyone else in a lot of ways, and I think that's what really excites me too about about the character Sandy, but also just the competition, where I know that like it's gonna feel so different going to that first LAN tournament. I'm gonna be in Manhattan hopefully within the next couple weeks. So I do think that are there plans to have the tournaments at where the
At
nightclub
the
is?
nightclub, I don't know. I'm a few hours removed from that, so I'm not entirely
Mm.
sure. Um, I saw Nico, I saw Ryobeat cryptically talking about
Yep.
some tri-state stuff that's in the works. I don't know. That's all that they've said. I don't know anything yet, more specific than that. But like I said, there's so much momentum around the game that I think it would be crazy to not um jump on that bandwagon and give players an opportunity to perform and see how the scene develops. So
Yeah.
I'm excited. Yeah, I'm excited for more events and stuff to pop up.
Yeah, and speaking of events, great segue. Our last topic for today, we have SmashCon coming up, and we were trying to look at who the top seeds were for the game. Smash GG, if the seeding isn't completely done, it's kind of a crapshoot of who's exactly seeded to be top. But I also don't think we're quite into the um, the coronavirus is still here. Like we're still in the pandemic, right? In a lot of ways.
Mhm.
So this might not be the most indicative of how successful the game will be on LAN, but it is very exciting to see, a $10,000 prize pool plus, or $10,000 prize bonus, or a big prize pot.
Yeah, I
Um,
think it says $10,000 prize pool. I don't know if that's specifically pop bonus or if that's just like the minimum that they're paying out, no matter like what the entrant total is.
right.
But
That's a good chunk of change regardless.
Mhm.
So I mean, we tried to look into the players. I don't think that's the best line of discussion here, but I'm curious, like what you're going to be looking for, in this first LAN tournament. Are you going to have a chance to watch first of all?
Yeah, I'm intending to watch for sure. I mean, I'm really looking for how, like, if interactions change, if certain characters appear to do worse on LAN, or if some characters appear to do better. I mean, right, the other side of that, where um I think that a lot of people have talked about how the meta has kind of like centered around like I don't love the term, but people say, just like spamming, right? Where the people will just throw out moves, big hitboxes. Particularly with like Aang, I think just comes to mind as, throwing out a nair and then it leads into a bunch of other nairs. And I'm wondering how much you know, that success has been derived from having some rollback issues where people don't have
Mm,
as quite of like clear animations to look at and react properly and space properly. But if we're on land now, like I wonder if people figure out how to deal with that character a little bit more easily. Same with like some other characters. It'll be interesting to see how everything plays out in that regard. Where I'm wondering if like the pace of play shifts at all because people feel like they have better reactions. Like people are being a little bit more diplomatic in how they throw out moves, and um, maybe there's combos and stuff that people have labbed out on land that don't feel like you can be as precise because of rollback. Just any shifts in the meta, I think, are going to be really interesting, and obviously, character and meta discussion is like what characters are getting the best results this weekend. It's been all over the place early. New characters have popped up. Characters that we thought were really good have kind of like moved to the wayside. Uh, all those kind of things. I'd love to see how the meta kind of shifts, both as far as like the gameplay, but also just like where the characters and stuff all fall in the end.
yeah, those are really good points. The rollback, I guess the online to LAN dynamic is going to be very newly explored, and what a place to do it at a huge, or at least the biggest tournament you could imagine for the situation we're in for the new game, at SmashCon, which feels actually very appropriate. That it's like an established event filled with players that would very likely just tack on and be like, oh yeah, I'll play this too,
Mhm.
So yeah, definitely how the characters show up in the top eight. Hopefully, it's not super dominated. I doubt it. I really don't think we're gonna have a bunch of like newly minted Michelangelos just running around, spamming grab. I really do think that we're gonna have some surprise characters, or something that we don't expect, or maybe something we thought was good. Like, how sick would it be if SpongeBob won, by the way? Like, if just
Yeah.
the narrative of that, of just, it's like if Mario won the first Melee tournament.
Yeah, exactly.
But I doubt that'll happen. But it'll probably be one of the characters that we know is really good, but it's cool that there's probably 4 to maybe 6 that could do it, and that's exciting to see, like, how not just who's going to win, but all the good matches that are going to come out of it. And this is a good opportunity for people to really study VODs. I don't know if any of the new players coming into the game would think of how to study VODs, but if your character's up there, find a VOD. It's very likely the small cast that everyone besides the bottom 3 are gonna have some sort of pools match or some gameplay. And I'm excited to just control F Sandy and just see what my main's doing, and start like learning with the metagame. It's honestly a very exciting time to be a part of platform fighters and the Smash scene and all that. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and something I kind of just thought of also is, right, like a lot of the competitors, especially what we think are going to be the top placers, generally, like in this event, this is going to be the first time that they're going to be competing in multiple games at the same time, right? Like, you have like the ultimate top players who are going to be competing in 2 different games at once. Melee players, the same deal. I know that people have always talked about that being really difficult, playing multiple games at once. I've definitely noticed that, like, a lot of my muscle memory has been off going between like Melee and Nick All-Stars at times, where going back to Melee, I'm like, oh, there's like my muscle memory is different because, like, I use the L to shield, where in Melee I'm using both triggers for different things, so I have to kind of like relearn that. I'm wondering I wonder if they'll even talk about it, but players coming out of the event, whether they felt like their performance in either their main game with Smash or in Nick All-Stars was affected by playing in multiple events, and whether that affects their whether they're more reluctant to enter and stuff moving forward. I'm just wondering how easy that is to kind of balance playing multiple games like that at once.
Yeah, and maybe a topic for next time. It might be viable to look for a separate controller for it's looking like I think button remapping is a huge. We didn't even touch on that, but that's a big wish list item. Is 2 shield buttons, for the love of God.
Oh my God, please
let me wave dash at a shield. It's allowed, but it's just so hard right now.
Yeah.
So I think, like, honestly, I haven't seriously considered switching to box for Melee, but I think this game would be really suitable for it.
For sure.
Digital inputs. It's like it's almost a no brainer. So that might be a solution for some people, and it might be what I do going forward, is like, all right, I don't have different muscle memory because I don't play any other game on the GameCube controller besides Super Monkey Ball at 3 a.m.
Exactly.
So we'll talk about that later. I think we're at our time here, but damn, dude, I feel like I could have done this for another hour. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, this is great, man. It's awesome.
So we'll have debrief to talk. I mean, I'm down to do this again next week if you are.
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to talk about how everything transpires this weekend, and if any new trends emerge.
So let's end on this. What character is going to win Super Smash Con?
Oh, I think we're gonna end up seeing. I think it's gonna be an Aang. I think Aang's gonna play out the best, but we'll see. That's my speculation.
I think it's going to be Lucy. I think Lucy's too weird for everyone to get a handle on. She's got so much going on, and unless there's a matchup, someone who has good matchup experience, I think a good Lucy is going to come in and just slaughter people. But hey, I'll take either one. This will be a fun weekend. Happy to do this. We'll talk again soon, and keep grinding, man. Let's get good.
Yeah. Sounds good.
All right, see ya.
Later.